Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get started here today. So we're going to continue along this path we've been on for forever. Hopefully wrap it up today. We might have one more day. I don't know how far we're going to get, so we're going to build all of this load balance stuff right here, but there's a few challenges that we still need to develop methods to deal with. So for one thing, when we upload images to our WordPress site, and currently what will happen is it will store it on whatever application server that was processing that request. Now that's not really the intended thing that we want to happen, because if we store an image on this server and then a load balance request gets bounced to a different server, then we're not going to be able to find our image anymore. So we're going to eventually look at NFS, which is basically a network file system, to resolve those issues, but that's going to take a bit to get around to. But today, the main objective that we want to do is set up a basic load balanced WordPress site, and we're not going to really take into account the WP content files issues right now. Another way that would commonly be used to resolve that problem would be to use some sort of cloud CDN stuff where you just upload all of your files to basically just static web server somewhere else that manages all of that for you, and that's generally a good way to do it. So most of the stuff we're going to talk about today isn't particularly new. We're going to look at Nginx configurations again really quick just to give a refresher on that, but for the most part I'm going to go pretty fast on everything else. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So remember, we left our configuration like this. Our procs, or our Nginx configuration, should be pretty much good to go, I think. Remember, we are passing to these two backend servers. So this is our Ubuntu. I messed up my naming already. This is passing to both Ubuntu 2 and Ubuntu 3 right now. And we're using this IP hash directive so that a request from an IP address always goes to the same server. So if I, as the client, am requesting something from 1.100, let's say this X Ubuntu server that I'm on right now is 1.100, that will always route my request to either one of these servers, but it will always be the same. And we're going to look into really quickly also what would happen if we don't have this IP hash directive on in our Nginx server. And we'll see that when we log in and we refresh the page, what will probably happen, what we'll hopefully see end up happening if we have something like the default round robin or least con turned on, is that we'll be logged out and we'll be logged back in, we'll be logged out and we'll be logged back in. When we're logging in, it's generating cookies, and those are being stored in your browser, and there's data that's being stored on the server. And if there's no data on the server for the associated cookie, we will not be logged in, basically. And that's why we generally want to route to the same application server. The other way that people have traditionally solved this is put your application session information on another server. So perhaps put your PHP session information, you can configure it to actually be stored in a database or on an NFS server, which would be another way of kind of resolving this. But at that point, we're ending up with a lot of network latency. Every single request would end up having to go to the NFS server, go to the database to retrieve the session cookie, the session information, and that's just generally something we don't want to do. And this is really the easy way of solving it, is with IP hash. But for right now, what I'm going to do is just delete that IP hash. We're going to, well, let's leave it on for right now. I don't want it messing with the installation. I'm sure it would probably really break the WordPress installation. The other thing we'll probably have to do is go into the WordPress config a little tiny bit and mess with it, because I don't want to go through the GUI installation twice if we don't have to. So there we go. Alright, so what I think I'll do is I will download the WordPress source just on my main box here. and then we'll just use SCP to copy it over. And com is their hosted, org is their actual tool site where you can download it from. So just download that. And I think we're just going to come back to that in a second. So before we do anything else, I'm just going to go over to Ubuntu 4. Let's go find Ubuntu 4. So I need another tab here. DSU add Ubuntu 4. This is just annoying. Got to clear that out. And it's not on. That would help if I turned it on. So Ubuntu 4 is going to be our database server. So we're going to go through just really fast. We already covered how to set everything up. We already covered how to do remote access. So this is kind of just review stuff. I'm getting more hopeful any second now. It's either still booting up or I messed up the configuration. No, it's still just booting up. Okay. Alright, now we're good to go, I think. Now we're logged in. Okay, so database. So let's get ourselves a root prompt here. apt install MySQL server. I think it'll install the client too. And of course, when I'm booting up the box, it's trying to do automatic updates. So, thankfully that resolved itself fairly quickly. So actually, we'll just leave that. We'll let that install in the background. We'll come back to that when it finishes up here. We will go back over to Ubuntu 2, Ubuntu 3, and let's kick off the PHP installation. So lib apache 2 mod php install. Run that. It'll automatically install PHP for us. apt install lib apache 2 mod php. And I'll just open another terminal for localhost here. So we downloaded our stuff. Go over to downloads. Hopefully that will still be there. We have our WordPress source code right here. So I'll just SCP WordPress source code DSU add Ubuntu 2. Drop that in the home directory there. Send it over to Ubuntu 3. That's done. Let's see if we got our stuff installed here. Almost done with that. Done over here. And set the password. Alright. So I'm kind of bouncing around here because that install takes a while. So let's go ahead, we'll change our configuration for our Apache server a little bit to point to the WordPress directory instead. We also need to, of course, unzip our WordPress files. So we'll go over to var dub unzip home. Remember, we SCP'd it to DSU's home directory, so it'll be right there. WordPress. Of course, unzip isn't installed. Kick off that install while I'm over here working on this. So now we'll unzip it for real. So we now have this new WordPress directory. Let's go over to etc Apache 2, sites enabled. We'll change this to WordPress. And then what we'll do is we'll do the same thing that we did before. We're going to basically allow or re-owner it to what are we running as? www data. So then when we navigate to the setup, it will allow us to edit everything from the web GUI, and the PHP Apache user can actually edit the files. So we'll own capital R, I think, www data dot. Now we look at our permissions here. That's all www data. And I think the way we're going to do this whole setup is we're going to set up Ubuntu 2. So we're going to navigate to Ubuntu 2, point the database to Ubuntu 4, and then we're going to copy our configuration from Ubuntu 2 to Ubuntu 3, and then go back over to Ubuntu 1 and see if the whole load balancing setup works. So it's a bit convoluted. The other way we could do it is go straight to Ubuntu 1 and then just pick one of these servers, because since we have the IP hash enabled, or I guess we don't have it enabled. No, we do have it enabled right now. We could just pick one of the servers, set it up on, and then copy the configuration afterwards. But we're just going to navigate to Ubuntu 2 right now to set it up. But before we do any of that, let's go back over to our database box, and we'll go ahead and get started on that. So MySQL, let's just clear everything out here. MySQL, u root p, put the password there. Okay, we're going to do a couple things here. We need to create our database, create our user. So remember, if we're doing remote access, we either need to specify an IP address for this %sign, or if we're in a local environment and don't really care about security, we can just put this % here, and that will allow connections from any IP address. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So create database WordPress, and then we'll say grant all. I think maybe we can leave off permissions. Might have to come back and add privileges in there. So grant all on WordPress.star to WordPress at localhost, identified by password 1 exclamation point. I think I misspelled identified there. That would make sense. Identified. Did I misspell that? Anybody? Oh, and I don't want localhost, I want remote too. It might be a different version of MySQL. So I tried to combine the granting of permissions and the identified by password all into one statement. So I'm going to try and do a little bit differently. I'm going to go and I'm going to try and create the user, and then I'll grant the permissions. So let's try this instead. Create user WordPress at %sign identified by password 1 exclamation point. Alright, so that works. So grant all on WordPress.star to WordPress at %sign, and that works. So I guess in this particular version of MySQL, I just couldn't combine those two into one statement. So that's fine, and then finally we'll finish off by saying flush privileges. Privileges. Priv I wish I could just say flush privs, but I guess I can't do that. Privileges. Privileges. E? Whereabouts E? Someone want to spell it for me? B-R-I-V. Anybody? I. Jez. Okay, there we go. It's cool. So let's look at that. We can see right now MySQL is only listening on localhost. So even though we gave the user permissions to log in from remote hosts, we actually have to still edit it a little bit to make everything work correctly. So we head over to MySQL. MySQL conf d, MySQL conf, and we go down to this bind address right here. We'll just copy that, comment it out, switch it to 0000, so that's all interfaces. We'll restart it. Now we can see it's listening on all interfaces. So let's go back over to our WordPress, our first WordPress box here. So we're on Ubuntu 2. So we're going to need a couple, well, let's just install MySQL client right now and try and use the MySQL command line to connect and make sure everything's working correctly. So I'll just say apt install MySQL. It's either CLI or client. I think it's client. Yeah. So while that's working, I'm going to go back over to Ubuntu 3. We're going to unzip our source code. So home DSU WordPress. Remember we SCP'd that earlier. Done that. Let's go over to Etsy. We'll point it to the right directory. Document root here. All right. Okay, so MySQL, that's installed. MySQL. I think it's capital, I feel like it's capital U for host name, but I don't remember offhand. Host. H. Okay. MySQL U Ubuntu 4. So we're going to try and connect to that remote server again, test that out really quick. 2, 4. No, it's H. U is for user. What am I saying? H. U root. P. Of course, I misspelled MySQL. Or lagged MySQL. I don't really know. I don't think root's actually going to work. Because we never actually enabled root login from remote. I think we only enabled MySQL or WordPress login from remote. So that user's not even going to work, I don't think, and it'll just die on us. So let's try login with MySQL or WordPress instead. That should work. Unknowns. Server host Ubuntu 4. Now let's just try the IP address instead. 24. Okay, so we're connected. And we got WordPress there. So I guess we're gonna have to use the IP address instead. Some minute differences with how that works, I guess. So it doesn't matter, it works. So let's go ahead. We'll navigate over to Ubuntu 2 here. Yes, stupid broken pfSense DNS server as usual. Okay. As per usual, use the just IP address again. 22. All right. I never actually restarted Apache. And I don't think I installed the MySQL PHP module either. Install PHP MySQL. And then we'll restart Apache. Alright, so we got our WordPress set up there. That means we got PHP installed correctly, Apache installed, and the MySQL module should all be installed. Alright, so just like before, WordPress, password 1 exclamation point. The only thing that's different is our database host is now 192.168.1.24, so that's again Ubuntu 4. Okay, cool. We got all that set up. Site title, test, WordPress. Yep. Must provide an email address. Nope. Alright, cool. So we got our WordPress site there up and running. Cool. So now, when we navigate to our Ubuntu 1 box, and if DNS is still broken, it's going to be fun. Gosh, pfSense's DNS is so worthless. It's just so terrible. I don't even know why. Oh, there it goes. Okay. 21. So we see we're navigating to Ubuntu 1, and we're getting our WordPress site that would be served from 22. I forget if I have... What do we do? I think IP hash is currently on. Okay. So let's just, as a demonstration of all of this working and everything, we're going to turn off IP hash. Remember, that's going to reset it back to round robin. Round robin's the default balancer. Systemctl, restart, nginx. And what we should see right now is we're going to see WordPress. Well, perhaps we're going to see WordPress, and then we're going to see the WordPress setup. Now things get a little bit more complicated because when we're doing this, each time you navigate to the website, there's a number of different requests. So what is more expected is we'll just see a very, very broken website, I think. Okay, cool. So we can see as we're refreshing, we're getting some weird things happening here, and that's because we hadn't set up the other server yet, and that's expected. So when we get bounced to the first server, we're going to actually see our WordPress site, and when we get bounced to the second server, it's going to tell us that we need to set up. It's going to go to the setup, and then when we refresh this page, it's going to go back to the first server, and it's going to be like, well, we already did the setup, so it doesn't even matter anymore. So it's pretty expected behavior. So to finish all this off, what we can do, we're going to just turn back on IP hash so things are nice. Restart again. No, not networking restart. No. Okay, good. Nginx. Okay. So what we're going to do is before doing anything else, we're going to change our permissions back to owned by root so things don't get messed up. So ch own r root root, and then we have this wp-config.php, wp-config. And this is everything that was actually made in the install manager, basically. So what we can do is just copy this configuration file over to our other application server, and then we'll just copy it into the root directory or the document root directory, and then everything should be relatively all right. So again, we have that WP content issue to look at. But we'll just come back to that in a little bit. So I'll just say scp wp-config.php over to dsu at ubuntu 3. See if DNS is working. I don't know why, and maybe when we look at DNS and do DNS stuff, we'll figure out why DNS is always so terribly broken. 23. Alright, so we copied wp-config to the DSU user's home directory. So go over to Ubuntu 3, go into var www wordpress, and then we'll find that configuration file, home dsu wp-config, drop that right in there, and I think that should do it for our setup. Okay, so we do have IP hash on right now, and I don't think I ever installed php-mysql. So let's go back and we'll do that real fast here. And I probably need to restart Apache. Let's turn on round robin again, just to show that this is actually a little broken still. Lag. I need to reload. Yeah. So I'm going to bounce to the second server. Before I installed, so I just installed php-mysql to fix this issue, but that's what would have happened when it would get bounced to the one server. So coming back, we just installed php-mysql, we deployed that configuration. We'll go ahead and restart Apache to get that module loaded there. And then we should be relatively good to go. Alright. So we got our WordPress site here. So again, we're in round robin right now. So every other request will be bounced to a different server. So let's say we wanted to go log in. So WP admin, again, is our login page. We log in with password 1 exclamation point. And we're logged in right now. Now what we should see happen here is if we refresh again, we might be a little bit broken. Huh, that's interesting. So this is to do with, I think, what's happening here. And I was trying to debug this earlier. I was trying to figure out how this worked, but I think WordPress resolved the whole thing of session data being stored on one of the application servers. I think what they've gone to doing, we can actually look at this WP config. We can see a number of things down here at the bottom. All of these authentication unique keys and salts. So basically, I think what's happening here is your cookie is being encrypted with this data, and it's being pushed to the client. And there's no actual information stored on the server. It's all just being encrypted with these random data points that were generated during the installation. And as long as you have the right key in your WP config, it will decrypt anywhere. So I guess in this case, we don't even have to do IP hash. You used to have to do IP hash because they would store information in the PHP application session store, which is something, so if, it doesn't really matter, it's completely out of it doesn't matter at all, but it's something like PHP session data would normally be stored like var PHP. Basically, there's a folder somewhere that would store PHP session information, but WordPress kind of got around that by just encrypting the cookies, and then regardless of which server it goes to, the server decrypts it, gets your permissions from the actual cookie data, and then it goes from there. So I guess we don't even have to do round robin. So that makes or IP hash. So that makes things even easier. So there we go. We got everything installed, and this is the basic part of what you want, that I will want you to do for the lab. And if you get it to this point, if you can demonstrate that you can get it to this point, I'm relatively happy with that. So the final thing that we want to look at is that WP content. So remember before when we were setting up WordPress, we do need WP content to be readable, writable. So let's just go ahead, just for now, we're going to have to come back and delete this when we kind of set up the shared stuff. Let's go ahead and chown our www data WP content. That will allow our Apache user to read and write to WP content. So that was on Ubuntu 3. We're going to go over to Ubuntu 2 and do the same. Couldn't copy and paste. Alright, so let's go ahead and we'll make a little test post and we'll see what happens. Test 1, 2, 3, 4, test 1, 2, 3, 4. Add media. Got this picture right here, insert into post, and publish. So this is going to be, okay, so the first thing that I need to do here is I need to turn off my cache, because if I get it cached once right, it will actually not show up correctly. I still have IP hash on. Do I have IP? I can never remember if I have IP hash on or not. So no IP hash on, so we're round robin fully. So when I refresh this page, that data, let's just get the image. We'll open the image address. And we're actually navigated to 22 right now. So that might be something we need to fix too. The IP addresses might be kind of wrong. That's why. Okay, so we can see when we're round robining it there, it's failing every other time basically because that data was only stored on one of our servers. So that's one of the things that we're going to need to work around is that problem. Now I actually ran into the bigger problem here, and that's that the URLs that are actually generated are pointing to 22 instead of 21. So 21 is our proxy, and the data itself is actually going to serve through 22. And unfortunately, it's going to be annoying to change because we don't have, because we didn't sync the WP config. It doesn't sync when we edit it in our settings anymore. We have to manually sync it from one to the other. So what we basically want to do is change it to use the host name instead. So I could say Ubuntu 1 or something different, or the IP address. The IP address would probably work a little bit better. I wonder if I can just go into the config here and set the host name. Okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to... Okay, we got Ubuntu 2 here. I will chmod user plus write to WP settings so we can edit that. I'll navigate directly to 22 here. We're logged in, so I'm going to try and go to the admin part and fix my server name so it's always going to route my requests to my Ubuntu 1 box. So in order to fix that, I need to change my URLs from 22 to 21. It's 22 because when we set it up on 22, but we want things, of course, to go to 21. And that might be in the database part of it. I don't know if that's going to be in the WP config or if it's going to be in the database. Or the WP settings, I should say. Or was it config? Yeah, it was config. Wrong one. Okay, I think it's... Let's just look around here really quick. I think that's going to be saved in the database, not in WP config, so I think we'll be fine with that. Oh, and our zoom is just terrible. Okay. Ugh, scrolling is broken. Click on that post. I think our URLs are fixed now and it will actually serve correctly. Open image in new tab. It's still being served from 22. Oh, well, that's challenging. I think I might have changed the wrong... I'm going to try and do the permissions one more time here. Yes, because I did WP settings, not config. I think it is actually stored in the config. So I gotta resolve this before I do anything else. Or am I 22? So I think, okay, so I think what's happening here is if I go through all this and do it all again, I will get the right URL generated. Problem is when I made the post, the IP address was different, and I don't think it's being regenerated every single time that I'm doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and repost this. And hopefully that will resolve the URL IP issue. And we'll still have the issue where the data isn't being synced between the servers quite right, though. But that's something we can work on fixing. But first, I got to get the actual IP address correct. Okay. So now we can see it's actually routing to 21. So it's actually there now. Again, you have to go in to disable the cache to see the actual thing. So you could open up the developer tools, hit network, hit disable cache. And now it seems to be working correctly without any interference, which is odd. Use wget and see if I can trigger a change. Now it's seeming to work correctly. So at the very least, like, we changed the URL, so things are working as expected. We're running out of time today, so I think we'll just spend all of Wednesday working on NFS, working just to show how that works, because that's something that you'll need to do for other Unix administration type things. NFS is pretty common, but we're also going to apply it in the WordPress PHP context as well, so we can figure out exactly what's happening in all of these issues here. So this lab, probably going to have it due Sunday. So if that's over break to you, then yes. But aside from that, this will be the last thing we'll have to do before break, is this lab, setting all this stuff up. So we'll talk about NFS on Wednesday. The NFS component, I think, will just have, I don't know, 5 extra credit points if you want to go through and configure all the NFS stuff and get like a perfectly working WordPress setup. I'll maybe give you 5 bonus extra credit points. Otherwise, if you can get things kind of set up in something generally similar to this that functions for text data, then I'll be pretty happy, and I'll give you full credit. So you should see that lab coming up pretty soon. Again, remember, when we're working in the IA lab, I may log into your application, your VApp on there, and I'll go find that Ubuntu box. I'll navigate over to the Ubuntu box and just test your WordPress site out and make sure that everything works. So in regards to that, make sure your credentials are all WordPress, password and exclamation point, so I'm able to actually get in there and look at things. So yeah, if that sounds good to everybody, if there's any questions initially about any of this stuff, hang around. Any questions about the other labs that we've been working on, again, hang around. Come and see me, send me an email. And that's all I have for you today.